What's going on, you guys? Today's saddle stitching 101. You guys asked for it, so this is going to be a super basic tutorial on how to saddle stitch. I'll do another video later, basically talking about why we use the saddle stitch, some of the intricacies, how to go around corners a little bit better. But this video is basically just a reference video, so if you ever forget, you forget the steps, things aren't looking quite right, you can always come back to it and get right into the how-to. Okay guys, let's jump right into it. First thing you're gonna do after you have your needle threaded is you're gonna go from the back side, and we're not gonna do a loop at the beginning just because this is meant to be a quick and easy video on how to do a saddle stitch. Just a quick note on cutting your length of thread. You want to at least triple the length that you're sewing, and that's gonna change a little bit with how thick your leather piece is, because obviously the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So if you're zigzagging in and out with your thread, the thicker this is here, the more thread you're gonna use. But a good rule of thumb is triple the length of your stitch line. So once we have our thread through the leather like that, we wanna pull both of our needles up towards our face and make sure they're the same distance apart so that we have equal lengths of thread both on the left and the right. So the saddle stitch is basically 3 key points to make sure that you're getting the same diagonal stitches on both sides of the leather. So the first point is to make sure you always go into the back of the leather. This tan side here is labeled back. This purple side here is labeled front. We always want to go in from the back. So once we have our needle in, that is key point number 1. Number 2 is to always then take your needle in your right hand and go underneath this needle and make a little T. Not on top, but underneath. Grab from underneath and grab both needles in your right hand and pull it through, okay? That's key point number 2. Key point number 3 is to go back in the same hole, but at the top of the hole or the back of the hole. They're the same thing because this is a diagonal. So you want to go in to the top of the hole or the back, and then we do a little loop with our left hand thread. And then we just pull tight. You don't need to pull super tight, but a nice tug so that the thread tension is just right. So again, we go through the back, we go underneath with our right hand, grab both needles, pull through, and then all we do is we turn our T 90 degrees so that now this needle, which is not the same as this needle right here, goes back into that hole. So what you're doing is you're alternating your needles. This is just the simplest way to do it. Okay, let's look at that again. So in through the back, go underneath with the right hand, make the T, turn 90 degrees of the hole in the back. And I always give this thread a little tug on the left-hand side to make sure I didn't pierce my thread. Piercing your thread will cause a whole bunch of issues. If you test it by pulling on that thread, there's ways to fix it. All right. Again, through the back, make the T, turn 90 degrees, and back through the top hole. A little tug there, comes through nice and freely. That means I did not pierce my thread, and then we do our loop. And as you can see start to forming nice diagonal stitches on both the back and the front. Now if you mess up one of these steps, you'll get a very flat line on one side and diagonals on the other. So key point number 1, through the back, make your T, turn your needles 90 degrees, go back in with the other needle behind the thread, make your loop, and pull it through. All right, so I'm gonna do a few more stitches without talking, just so you can see. Just a quick note, these are 4.5 millimeter stitching spaces on my pricking iron. And this is 0.8 millimeter thread. The thinner your thread, the more dramatic these zigzags will become, and the more elegant or high-end your piece will look. All right. Now we're gonna just show you one other technique. You don't have a pricking iron. So we're gonna use this. This is just a normal diamond awl, okay? This goes in your right hand, and it's gonna pierce the front of the leather before we put our needles in. So basically the way this works is you would mark where your stitches go, either with a ruler or a wing divider, and then the back wouldn't have any holes in it yet. So your first step would then be to go in with your awl to open up that hole, back out, and then in through the back, just like we did before. Grab your needle, make your T, same thing, okay? Now it'll take some practice to figure out how to hold your awl in your right hand and also the needles. I like pricking things all the way through, but there are some builds, bags and such, where you just can't. So you're gonna have to use the awl eventually. And also, an awl is a great way to get any stitches per inch or any stitch spacing that you'd like. You simply mark it out, like I said before, with a wing divider or a ruler, and then you can have 2 millimeter spacing, 3, 4, 5, whatever you like, and you're just gonna make each hole individually with your awl. You can actually do this outside of the stitching pony and just punch all the holes first, just one by one. I did that a lot early on when I didn't have money to buy a bunch of tools. I just bought one awl and I could make all types of stuff. It just took a little bit longer. All right, let's do it one more time with the awl. One thing with the awl you have to make sure is you're getting the exact same angle as your hole so that you don't tear the leather more than you've already done. All right, so that was just a quick note on how to use an awl. I don't use that much in my builds. We're gonna finish up this stitch just to show you what it looks like when it's done. I'm actually gonna real quick just pierce the thread so you can see what that looks like. So what happened is I pulled this through, and then instead of going in the back of the hole, I maybe just went right through the thread. And now when I tug on it, it's not coming through, okay? So I can just push this needle all the way through while I'm pulling on the thread, and right there you can see how the thread is pierced. Now if I didn't break a bunch of fibers, I can then just back out the needle and then smooth that out. If it's a tear, then you're gonna have to restitch things. But if it just kind of went through and didn't tear anything, you can just continue on. All right, now that we're at the end of our stitch line, we can do a number of things. Most people like to back stitch. There are a number of ways to do this. You'll have to fool around with it a bit to see how you want your thread to lay in these holes. And you may pierce the thread pretty easily during this step because the holes are already full of thread. We'll just do a quick one for now. Basically, you're just doing the same thing, just in the other direction. So we went back once, and then since we're coming out of the top of the hole on this one, we want it to lay nicely, so we're gonna go to the top of the hole on this one, and that way we can get those stitches to be nice and parallel instead of crossed up. And then you'd simply snip here about a 16th of an inch, as close, pretty much as close as you can, and then burn it with a lighter so that creates that little mushroom top so that the threads don't slide back through. There we go. Leave about 1 millimeter, really trying to get as close as you can. And then just kind of cap those off. If you look closely, you can see the little melted ends, and that'll just prevent it from popping through the other side. All right, so there's your finished product. You got nice, even stitching, nice and diagonal on one side, same thing on the back. Keep in mind that the thicker this is and the thinner your thread, the more dramatic the diagonals will be. If you're only going through 2 pieces of leather with a thick thread, the stitching looks a little bit bunched on one side, which is normal. But just keep in mind, the smaller your project, the smaller your stitches or your thread should be. And same thing with your stitches, truly. Pretty much they scale up with whatever you're making. That said, there are a ton of high-end bags with tiny thread and tiny SPR, really small SPI or stitches per inch, I guess I should say, high stitches per inch. So yeah, there you go. That is the saddle stitch.